Should you feel more comfortable in Asia than in America as an Asian American? What's right? What's wrong? Let's talk about this Reddit post. It is from the Asian American Reddit forum. It says, more comfortable in Asia as an Asian than in America. I am a 1.5 generation Asian American and have visited South Korea and Japan and felt much more comfortable being around people of the same ethnicity than I am in America. So I'm assuming this person may be half Japanese, half Korean. It's really unclear to me. They're a 1.5 generation Asian American, which generally means they came over at the age of like 5 to maybe 12. I think that that is a key factor right here, because if you were born and raised in America, you are less likely to feel this way. Let's continue with the post. I am speaking for myself, but being Asian American makes me feel out of place, almost like in an exotic white tiger, obviously amongst orange and black striped tigers, and I've faced my fair share of discrimination as well. So coming back to Asia since immigrating to America at a very young age made me feel connected to my cultural heritage and made me feel more comfortable. Seems pretty natural, especially for someone who was born and spent some of their initial formative years in Asia, at least, which is like, that first 7 years or whatever. It is very nice not being glanced at or thought of differently whenever I enter an establishment such as a restaurant or store, and I plan on living in Asia in the future. Yeah, obviously, this guy has provided no details about whether he lives in the Midwest, Wyoming, Iowa. All these details matter because, as we know, America is a very homogeneous country. It's very diverse. Even different neighborhoods within New York City, I'm talking about even different blocks, 10 blocks over, can feel completely different. West Village, East Village, completely different. So there's no acknowledgement of that, but I'm not taking away from the truthfulness of his post. When I came back to Asia, I have to admit, I was a little bit scared of seeing Westerners after being so used to the comfortableness of a homogenous society or country, and it took some time for me to readjust. I'm guessing this is what Caucasian people in America or Europe feel whenever they go about in public, and the reverse of my case when they visit Asia. Yes and no. I think that the white people who tend to come to Asia, they are more like going for the harmonious, like Buddhist type of introverted flow. The West is very extroverted, and therefore not fitting into the West, whatever that means for every individual, can feel more jarring than not fitting into the East, because the East is all about, nobody's gonna like really stress to you that you don't fit in, at least initially, until you like maybe reach higher tiers of assimilation. Then it may become more apparent. But in the West, it may be apparent in the first 5 minutes, to be honest, depending on what setting you're trying to adapt into. Let's say, for example, the basketball court at a LA Fitness or a 24-hour fitness. If you don't fit in, they'll let you know potentially immediately, right? Is it normal for Asian Americans to experience this, that visit their home countries? This relates to a few other posts from the Asian American Reddit that I'm not going to fully get into, such as Chinese students live in ghettos as they fail to fit in at university. This was a UK, I want to say, an UK publication. I do think adaptation, by the way, in the UK is more difficult because that is a native white country versus America, which is a new world country. New world countries, America, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, a little bit of a different mindset versus a nativist UK, right? Other people immediately had book suggestions: Where I Belong, Healing Trauma, Embracing Asian American Identity. Some people were saying that book, it could or could not be useful. Absolutely. I think that these more, written by clinical psychologists and people with degrees and things like that certainly could be helpful. Even if you don't fully agree with the book, it can be useful to triangulate your thoughts, since these type of discussions that this poster is referring to are quite rare, because most people, even within their group of friends, even if you're all Asian American or 1.5, 2.0, 2.5, 0.25, whatever, everybody's at such a different point in their assimilation timeline. Just these discussions more rare, right? Because people just be like, dude, what are you talking about? You're taking it too serious. This is too intellectual for me. Most people opt out of those, really, from any group. Let's read this comment. This was the initial reaction to the post. The USA is my home country for all of its faults. Home is wherever you make it, right? Yes and no. Yes and no. It really depends on the scope of how you view things. Everybody has a different cloud of war and a different radar. Like if you guys have played MMORPGs, different characters have vastly different radars, and your radar actually on your MMORPG character sort of determines your worldview or your sphere of care, your locus, LOCUS. I don't think it matters if you are 10th generation or 1.5 generation. You don't look American, and you will always be considered not American by at least half the country. Okay, there's some truth to that, but also, like I said, back to the locus and the cloud of war and the radar field, do you need more than half the country to consider you an American? I think it varies per person. Some people that are hyper academic, they're almost like the giver, like they feel things in society at a much wider range. Other people are more like have a smaller sphere of care. So if they just got like the things they need around them for like 15 to 30 people, that's enough. Other people need a whole society of 300 million to care about them. And neither way is really right or wrong, but they're completely different locuses. Most people only focus on their locus, which is true, right? But other people are very clannish or parochial, and I know I'm using words with a little bit more of a negative connotation there, but they're much more like a horse with the blinders on of just caring about what they see in front of them. A lot of people, hey guys, don't kill me, accuse really pretty women who are more party girls of like being hyper. They only are looking at like 1-2 steps in front of them. Other people are like scanning this gigantic game map to see whether they fit in or not. And like I said, those are such completely different ways to live your life, right? So anyway, let me get in my quick thoughts before I get in the comments section. Point number one, it relates to what I just said. Your mileage may vary. I think that life in 2024 is way more variable on the individual traits of your archetype character now than it ever was. I think in the past, large swaths of people ultimately went through the same things. But nowadays, I think that even a brother and a sister or two brothers that are born relatively close to each other, but just raised differently or looked differently or were into different things. One guy was into sports, one guy was into music, one guy was into identity talks, one guy was not into identity talks. One guy was taller and better looking. One guy was shorter and more introverted and not as good looking. All these things, did somebody find a church or some sort of assimilation program that had some sort of median point? Basically what I'm saying is different people's traits could make their situation vary so much. It's a little bit like we said, people are so used to things being uniform. Like McDonald's has one promotion nationally, but a long time ago, McDonald's promotions were hyper local, and it was based if you were a corporate franchise or a private franchise. Did you want to give away free sweet and sour sauce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think obviously things have more stabilized to provide a more consistent experience over time, and I think Starbucks was crucial in that. Anyway, that's a whole different thing. But I'm just saying you got to understand, things are almost like how they were again in the 60s, where the promotions were hyper local and branch to branch. Point number two, a lot of things in life are just like basketball, right? There's an offense, there's a defense, there's an individual matchup on the wing, right? If you have the ball, but then there's also the team defense and the team offense. So I guess what I'm saying is, long story short, first of all, are you playing a solo game, an individual game? Are you playing a team game? And then within whatever context you're playing, more one-on-one ISO style or more team basketball, team defense, team offense, is the offense good enough to overcome the defense? The defense, in this guy's case, is feeling comfortable in America. Is his offense, whatever he's doing, whatever groups he's a part of, his own mindset, whatever he's reading, whatever he's the relationships he's having on a hyper micro level, interpersonal pings, day things, even interaction with the barista, are those things going to overcome the defense? In his case, the offense is not overcoming the defense. In fact, it looks like the offense is succumbing to the defense, or the defense is stopping the offense, essentially creating, getting a stop. So I'm saying that in his case, it sounds like he really should go to Asia or look at a lot of Asian American enclaves that may make him feel dramatically different from the locality in America he's referring to not fitting into, feeling like a white tiger amongst orange tigers. Point number three, there are even white Americans that move over to Japan and Korea. So it's like those are the two coolest, cool exclusive club buy-in societies in Asia right now. I think Taiwan and Singapore are also first world societies, more Mandarin speaking, or English is kind of split in Singapore. But I'm saying that the cool exclusive tribes are like Japan and Korea, South Korea right now. And for example, like I'm in Bangkok right now, and actually there's a ton of authentic, hyper authentic interior restaurants from a ton of different cultures. You can go to a Beijing hot pot spot that feels just like Beijing or Chengdu. You can go to spots that feel like Osaka or Okinawa. You can go to spots that feel like Seoul. However, it's very mixed, and I think that that's why Bangkok, specifically certain districts, you know, Prampong, Ekamai, Tonglor, they almost feel like Roland Heights. If you guys know about Roland Heights and the SGV, it is primarily kind of like Chinesey in a way, but it's just very, very mixed. Like people go to Banana Bay, Thai. Anyway, moving on to number 4. Asians do get alphaed a lot in America. People are either going to attempt to alpha Asians, or you're going to spend a lot of your time like fighting off alpha attempts, whether or not you ultimately get alphaed or not. And I think this especially applies to Asian men. I do think it applies to Asian women as well on a lower tier of frequency. And it's basically just a situation, he didn't mention in the post, but like some guys don't like dealing with it. And it's a little bit like black guys saying, oh, police look at us differently, or Latinos saying people make assumptions about my family's immigration story, or white people saying, oh, everybody thinks I'm rich, or I'm from old money, or my parents own a bunch of real estate. These are generalized stereotype incidents where not everybody, 100 out of 100, like maybe only 90 out of 100 Asian American males. Let's be conservative. Let's say it's 80% of Asian American males know what it's like for people to constantly try to alpha them in mixed settings. But 100% of guys know what you mean. Maybe you didn't go through it personally, but these are just such hyper generalized stereotypes in the Western world. And because the Western world is so diverse, people tend to paint each other with broad brushstrokes just to get by with their day. That's what I have noticed, right? But it really depends sector to sector. Do you work in a specific industry? Anyway, let's get into the comment section. Number 1, we will blend into Asia phenotypically, but not behavior-wise. Some people are saying that Americans really like to lean on things, sort of this James Dean, Marilyn Monroe sort of casual vibe. You know, also, I do think that you may act more or less American depending on the context you're in. Like some people go to Asia and act like they're white frat bro dreams out, but other people might just become like super Asian and lean into like watching animes and stuff on tablets, and you know what I mean? Like it just depends. Like different people react to being in a different fishbowl than the one they were born into differently. So like we said, that's a whole nother calculation, and that goes back to the why MMV, your mileage may vary, variability of like, if you don't feel comfortable in the States, what should you do? Point number 2, living there for a short stay in Asia and working there are 2 completely different things. So these are all these comments saying, yeah, listen, you'll feel like a tourist if you'll blend in if you're just on some tourist consumption-ish. But if you actually want to be there and work, maybe even work at a company or have these long-term relationships, have a wife, have kids, they go to international school or local school or whatever, you'll start to feel the cultural differences. I would agree with that. But you know, the weird thing that I've noticed is that, like, for me, adopting to different rules is no big deal to me. I played on the West Coast, continuation on and one. Like, let's say, for example, you get fouled and you miss the layup, you say and one, people will still acknowledge that as a foul call. On the East Coast, specifically New York City, if you get fouled on layup and you make it and you call foul and not and one, you will not get continuation on it. And I just noticed that even some Asian Americans, because they play FIBA-style continuation basketball, zero checkup here in Bangkok in the half court. And I noticed some Asian Americans from America not even be able to adapt to the non-checkup style. So I'm like, bro, even Asian Americans, it goes to show you, some people are just not adaptable. You know what I mean? And that goes to, like, it's about adaptability. Of course, everywhere is different. Of course, just because we look like people out here, it doesn't mean that we're just gonna like fit in because we're coached another way. But how many teams have you been traded to adapt to different schematics? Defensive teams, offensive teams, 7 seconds or less. You need Princeton offense, 8 passes, cut before you. It just really depends on you as a person, how adaptable, or what's your adaptability rating on a scale of 1 to 10. And a lot of Asian Americans, shockingly, below a 5. I've seen it. Theoretically, you would think that we would be above a 5 just due to the situations that we were born into, but not everybody is. Next point, a lot of Westerners are moving over to Asia right now, ever since their economies went to ish, and also people just not liking the West anymore. And then this sort of led into a discussion saying, I hope they can make China have better manners, or I hope that a lot of people can move from places like Japan to China and make people have better manners. And then somebody posted this behind the greedy Chinese person stereotype video. So this is a little bit of an aside. And I know that like I'm trying to keep these videos like more like centered on one lane, but let me just address this. Yes, like I said, in East Asia for sure, and just maybe you could even argue in all of Asia in general, China does have a scarcity mindset issue, especially amongst the older generation in terms of like grabbing all the crawfish or the lobsters at a buffet or something like that. Everybody's seen the videos. And it is driven from overpopulation or communism or whatever it is. People really stuck in that scarcity mindset. Yeah, and but I think it's changing. I think here's the thing, guys, about life. Like, there's a lot of things that are outside of our control, and they're just going to change at the pace they're going to change. But believe me, if you look at the macro factors, they're going to change. But yes, they're not going to change at the pace that you want them to or that makes you feel comfortable, to be honest. There's so many factors in this, like when you talk about macro swings that are completely out of our control. Next up, people said, I feel the most comfortable in Hawaii. I feel the most comfortable in Hawaii. Asia's not for me. And just basically, Hawaii is a very interesting middle ground. I think Hawaii is a little bit like, it's niche for me. For me, I'm way more into like San Gabriel Valley or OC, somewhere like a Irvine or something like that. But Hawaii's pretty dope too. And I think Hawaii was like that before these ethnic enclaves like Edison or whatever it is in New Jersey, Bel Air in Houston. I'm sure there's so many Asian neighborhoods. Like even Tempe, Arizona is a brand new Asian American enclave with like 40 different brands of boba shop or whatever like that. So I just think that Hawaii was the original enclave in America, even like 20, 30, 40 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 even. But obviously nowadays you have a lot more optionality of finding the ones that fit you. Like when I was growing up in the Seattle area, there was no Asian American enclave. You could say that Bellevue, like Factoria, Newport High School was the closest thing, but it was even capped at like 30%. And nowadays it might be maybe over 51%, 50, you know what I mean? So anyway, it depends on what you need. But yeah, Hawaii, definitely look at Hawaii. If you're into nature, you into aloha spirit, you know, you want to speak some pidgin, Hanabata days, brother, get some grind, Ono grinds, bro. Somebody said, we don't fit into Asia. We are only Asian American. So we're not going to fit into non-Asian spaces in America, and we're not going to fit into Asia in general. I'm just looking at places in California, whether NorCal, if you're a little bit more nerdy, and SoCal, if you're a little bit more social, networking, party, business driven, like merchant driven. I could agree with that. California is never a wrong play. Here's the only problem. Very expensive. Cost of living is very high. Your kids may get caught up in the who got the newest car at high school, who's the coolest kid thing. But it really depends. Like I said, if you're being like, you know, if you're more into gaming and computer programming, you may want to take a look at Seattle or some place with more, you know, brain-based industries, intellectual, you know, tech IQ-based industries. But like I said, that's going to be back to the YMMV situation. Somebody said it depends on your point of reference. For example, this person was like saying, it really depends on what you mean by Western society. So here's another anecdote that I want you guys to think about. I used to live in Hong Kong for a little bit, a few years ago, maybe 6 years ago, pre-COVID. And I remember that everybody that had permanently relocated from Canada to Hong Kong was from Calgary. People who were from Vancouver and Toronto would visit Hong Kong, but only people from Calgary and like Manitoba and other places in Canada would actually, Saskatchewan would fully move to Hong Kong. And I noticed that that's the same thing that happened with Koreans moving back to Seoul from Seattle. LA Koreans, Atlanta Koreans, and New York Koreans don't permanently relocate to Seoul typically because they get enough of what they wanted where they were from. But people, Koreans in Seattle, just like the Cantonese Hong Kong kids in Calgary, felt so denied that comfortable space to operate growing up that they just shift all the way over. So it is even hyper contextual to the city and the amenities that the city you grew up in provided your reference point for what even qualifies as Western society. Some people said sometimes you've trained your whole life on how to be a minority or how to represent your group in a mixed environment, that's what you're most comfortable in. I agree with that. If you are comfortable being the foreign diplomat, the foreign embassy, or the, you know what I mean, foreign ambassador, external ambassador for your group of people in a mixed setting, that's not wrong. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't spend 3 to 6 months in the motherland or in a very similar motherland of origin enclave just to get some more perspective. Like even the foreign diplomats that get sent to other countries, they still get a refresher course back. And they don't just go on a 30, 20, 40 year mission to be an ambassador. They're still need to update and stay close with that. But yeah, obviously not everybody does do that. Some people just really stay in that frozen in time situation that oftentimes our grandparents or our parents who immigrated over from the old world in Asia kind of stick with too. Like they're almost like a frozen snapshot of when they left. And last but not least, this was the final comment. Somebody said, live in a micro enclave in a huge diverse city. That is the best plan. For example, live in the SGV in LA, or live in, Westminster, Garden Grove, et cetera, the Cerritos or whatever in the OC. Live in Chinatown, New York. Live in whatever, Milpitas in the Bay Area, or like if you're Filipino, live in Daly City, or et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean? Like, because you'll get the best of both worlds. Your micro environment will be very comfortable for you to operate in along with your parents or your kids or whatever. But then just a 5 to 10 minute drive away, you could get to a completely different ethnicity's zone or domain. Yeah, I think that's not bad either. So, like I said, it really depends on how outgoing you are and how willing you are to navigate these different worlds, because the Bay Area and the SoCal, the fishbowls being so close to each other, it is really different. And oftentimes I find that people choose ultimately to not navigate the fishbowls. Like, for example, SGV in East LA. East LA is about 97% Mexican. SGV, I want to say, is about 51% Asian. You're not going to find a lot of people who hang out in East LA and SGV. And I don't think that that's really right or wrong, but I'm just saying, like, just because there's a bunch of diverse fishbowls, it's sort of like New York City. Yes, you can go to Harlem, you can go to like Spanish Harlem, you can go to the Upper East Side, which is like more Jewish American, you know what I mean? But who does? Some people, ASAP Rocky does, but does everybody? Right? Like, not, or Andrew Schultz is not everybody's ASAP Rocky and Andrew Schultz, right? It took a lot of work and certain traits to become like that. But like I said, I ultimately think that SGV, I'm a big fan, and it depends. If you want a little bit more of the immigrant vibes, go to a West SGV, which is more like San Gabriel. If you want a little bit more higher end version, you can go to Roland Heights, Diamond Bar, things like that. So that's my pick. But like it said, it depends on what Asian you are, and if you are more academic, you might want to look at the Bay Area. If you're more money centric, trade, my, you might want to look at Roland Heights. Or if you want to really feel part of Americana but still be Asian, you might want to look at Irvine or things like that. So, yeah, I think that SoCal is the best compromise choice. I think that Hawaii is a little bit far. It's expensive to even get a gallon of milk because they got to import it in over the ocean. But I definitely think that's a niche pick. It could be you for Japanese Americans, somebody who really loves surf and aloha. And basically what this person is bringing up, by the way, I am in Bangkok right now. I think Bangkok is actually a lot more mixed than a lot of people think. And yeah, I just think that everybody's got to make the right choice for them. This poster is not wrong for making this video, but the discussion should not be about whether you should stick it out in America or you should immediately fly to Asia. It should force people to analyze the metrics, because the individual metrics for each person, their dreams, their desires, their capacities, how do they want to spend their day? Who do they want to spend their day around? What do they want around them in terms of close proximity, medium proximity? What do they want around them in an hour flight away, 2 hours flight away? Do they speak, you know what I mean? Like, how enamored are they with other Western cultures? Do they speak Spanish? Like, these type of things all come into play. So that's actually my ultimate takeaway, is like, yo, I just want to encourage people to ask the right questions. But oftentimes the right questions are not the emotional questions. They're actually scientific questions that you could just break down like a greens on a checklist. So anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you feel more comfortable as an Asian in Asia? Like, as an Asian American, do you feel more comfortable in Asia, or do you feel more comfortable in America? For me, I don't really think that I'm similar to anybody wherever I am. I just feel like myself, and I feel like, maybe I'm a little bit more composed of like stark contrast identities than your average like normative bulk distribution person. But I accept that, and it allows me to just exist within that. I'm not thinking, I have at points in my life thought about like, am I fitting in with the larger bulk distribution of the society? But I no longer think that way. However, I can't tell everybody to be like that, because you have to be built like that. Not saying that it's better or worse. I'm just speaking on, from my own individual experience and my own individual situation. Anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think. Let me know what more, different topics you want me to talk about. Until next time, live from Bangkok, Hop Hop Boys, I'm out. Peace.